our talks. You'll get discounted coaching when available and officiation for your swim as well. In this series, we talk to icons of Cape long distance swimming. How did they start? What inspires them? And what cold water anecdotes do they have to share with us? Tonight, we're going to be planning about a 30-minute discussion, followed by a question and answer session at the end. Please ask your questions in the comments section. I think Kerry's already put a message out there, so add to that. Keep them short if you can. I may not be able to get to all of the questions, but I'll do my best to get through as many as possible. Well, on to the guest today. The guest today is 2021 World Open Water Swimming Man of the Year nominee, Ryan Stramrood. He's almost certainly best known for being the record holder for the most Robben Island crossings. I think it's about 115, if I'm not mistaken, Ryan.
Yep.
And Ryan is also well known for public speaking, where he shares with audiences around the world his personal swimming journey. His swimming journey is impressive. Outside of South Africa, it includes an English Channel crossing with a team of South Africans. He also did the first official ice mile in Antarctica in -1 degrees, and a swim in the Jokulsarlon Glacier Lagoon in Iceland as well. Most recently, though, last month, in fact, Ryan completed the impressive feat of swimming across the unpredictable waters of False Bay. He swam 33 kilometers from Miller's Point to Royals in an incredible time of 8 hours and 39 minutes, which is a new Guinness World Record. Well, so congratulations, Ryan. Have you got over the elation of completing the swim?
No. You know what? It's 13 years down the line, and I'm still chuffed with my English Channel crossing. So watch this space. No, it's a great personal achievement for me, and there was such a personal, deep journey that got me to the shores of False Bay, which I'd love to share with everybody in time. So the elation is going to last a little longer than 3 weeks, Tom.
So can you paint us a little picture about the day? What were the conditions like? When did you start? How did it go? How did you feel through the swim?
Sure. So anybody who knows me knows I've been talking about that swim for a long time and training hard for it, and watching the weather, and more importantly for me of late is watching the water temperature. And together with Derek Fraser, we've been watching making the decision as to whether we have to follow the other 5 successors who all made it from Royals across to Miller's. No one's ever gone successfully the other route. And that was also a personal mission of mine. I wanted to do the other route, and you're either going to be brave attempting it or come across as being very silly attempting it. So that added a lot of pressure, which I certainly didn't shoulder myself. And we watched, and Derek certainly had a theory that the northwester or the westerly is what you should catch across. So I agreed, and we eventually pegged it. And after a long time of waiting for the right water conditions, and then finding that day where the wind looked like it was going to work for us. And remember, obviously, you've got to call this a few days ahead of the time to make sure you get all your planning right. And then you hope that weather prediction doesn't change while you're putting all your pieces in place. But it didn't, and we planned it for the 18th of March. Got to Miller's Point at about 5:30 in the morning. It is pitch dark. There was no moon whatsoever. Couldn't see your hand in front of your face. And Derek and I had a brief discussion the night before that we'd wait until it was light enough so he could sort his boats out. But as I arrived, quite relaxed and ready for another half an hour of prepping and getting myself ready, Derek and the team were already in the boats with the engine running, saying, like, didn't think you were going to pitch, Ryan, where are you? So I literally arrived, parked my car, and jumped into the boat. And you go from there. There are 2 slipways there. One where you launch the boat, and one just round the corner. It's about a 5-minute little boat chug around where you actually start. So it was pitch dark. You've done all your planning. You are ready. As even, I get myself, I procrastinate a lot, but when I'm ready, then I'm ready. All I want to do is get in that water. And I remember cruising around in the pitch dark. You can't see anything that's going on besides the lights in the boat. And we got as close to the slipway as we could. I put some Vaseline on, which was a huge difference, by the way. When you get to the English Channel, you lather yourself with all kinds of what they call the special channel grease, for False Bay, I literally had a little tub of Vaseline and I put under my armpits. That was the sum total of the chafe protection. And at about 5:58, I jumped in the water and swam to the slipway, cleared the water. There was a spotlight held on the slipway, so I could see where I was going. And it was then a start at exactly 6 a.m. Just showing, I hope you can all see the slide. That's us just moving around from the one slipway to the other. I haven't done lots of pics. I just wanted you guys to get an idea of how pitch dark it is. But shortly, after you're swimming and you're just starting to get into the groove, it starts to look a little bit like that. And how beautiful is that? It's enough to warm the soul. Of course, I couldn't see much of that yet because I was face down and breathing to the side. But those are the early conditions of my False Bay. It looked beautiful, and you kind of really hope that it stayed there, which unfortunately it didn't. Tom, you must tell me how long you want me to go on, so I'll just.
That's fine.
I mean, look, I'm about this. I'll make this whole half an hour about the False Bay thing. So let me nip it in the bud a little bit. What was important for me. I do a lot of Robben Islands, as you pointed out, and a lot of training swims. And it's very, very hard for me anyway, to not do Robben Island or one of the longer training swims where I'm swimming to finish, if that makes any sense. I'm swimming to get out. So when I start a Robben Island, all I can think of is getting to the beach. Now, if you take on a swim of this magnitude and your mindset is I'm trying to reach Royals, and you're kind of looking up every feed to see, like, are you getting any closer? You're in for a big surprise, because those Royals mountains stay far away for a very, very long time. So I had spoken to got my head in the game that I'm not interested in getting there. I'm interested in swimming until it gets dark again. So that's the mindset that I'd conditioned myself. I'd started in the dark, and I told myself I'm not allowed to moan about anything or have any negative thoughts until it is dark again. And then I can start to have a look. Then it should be about 12 hours in, and I should be getting closer. If I'm not, then I've got some serious problems.
So you, so, I mean, but the big surprise, of course, you weren't even close to dark when you finished. I mean, you finished at around 2, right?
Yeah.
I mean, did you have the record in mind? I mean, you've been talking about this, but I mean, we hadn't talked about a record at all. I mean, was that even in mind?
Absolutely not, if I'm brutally honest. No, I was very nervous for the False Bay swim for a number of reasons. I know Borghausen really well, and I've swum with him in a swimming pool many times, and I'm nowhere vaguely close to his pace, and he holds the record. So no, it wasn't a consideration. I just wanted to get across, and there's some classic video footage that I hold when I was 15 kilometers in on a feed, 15.2 kilometers exactly. Derek said to me, "You know what, Ryan, if you keep this pace up, you could close in on this record." And I said a very rude word to him, because I didn't want to hear that. Because if you sow that seed to me, there've been so many times, like in a Robben Island, where you're an hour off the beach and like, well, Ryan, if you really push, you're going to get your personal best, or you're going to break a sub 2. And then you have a horrible hour because you raise your game and you swim like crazy, and then you usually miss it by like 30 seconds or a minute, and you wonder why you bothered. So when I was still 17, 18 kilometers away from Royals, and Derek was saying you should go for the record, I didn't want to hear that, because that's a lot of pressure to put on myself. So I told him to hold those thoughts to himself a little while. But every feed, he would just say, "You're still on track, you're still on track." And I eventually said, "Right, if I'm still on track and I've got 10 Ks to go, then you tell me, and I've still got the amount of energy that I had, then I'll give it a go." So that's exactly what happened. I was feeling really strong in the swim. My training was really good. My headspace was great. The water temperature was exactly what I'd ordered, 18.5, 19 degrees. And I was feeling really strong. So on the 10K out mark, Derek said, "If you can give me 10Ks in 3 hours, you're going to get this record." And I think I said, I'll give it to you in 2.5. And I did it in 2:37, the last 10Ks.
And how's that? And any wildlife joined you along the way?
Lots of seals, but not the wildlife that everybody expects. Obviously, the first question when you tell anyone you're doing False Bay is, what about the great white sharks? I saw no sharks whatsoever. I didn't expect to see any, and I wasn't particularly worried about that. However, 2.5 kilometers into my swim, I swam into a patch of blue bottles, which was a thick patch. They were littered everywhere. There's no avoiding them. It was still dark, so it was very hard to see them as well. And that was brutal, to be honest. And that really impacts your swim and your mental state, because you just 2.5 Ks, I'm just starting to settle into a rhythm, and I've got like, you know, my playlist playing, my mental playlist in my head, and all the things that I've planned to think about. I'm just getting going, and then whack, you hit the first blue bottle. And, you know, for me, they get stuck in my stubble, and they go under my nose, and they wrap around my fingers. And, you know, with a blue bottle, when it stings, it really hurts. And even if you get the sting off, it still feels like it's stuck to you, you know. So it's really horrible. And I kept hitting more and more, and I was entangled in them. And we tried lots of different things. You know, Derek and Debbie immediately sent one of the boats forward and said, I must swim behind it, and maybe they will kind of break a path. That didn't work, unfortunately. And then I had a wonderful moment personally, and I don't think I've shared this with anyone, you know, right in the middle of those blue bottles. I suppose on less important swims, you would get out, just because, you know, it's brutal. It really is, Aina. But I just said to myself, you know, I don't know if harden the hell up. I'll say it politely. I have a little conversation with myself and said, right, you're actually going to absorb this pain, and there's no way you're getting out. And I was saying all the swear words as well, above the water and below the water, which helps me. And then Derek did something clever. He sent the boat forward, the one boat forward, just to have a look how long I'd have to endure this. And I think about 200 to 300 meters further, they came back and reported that it starts to clear. So I knew I just had to break through that barrier. And then, you know, it also changed my mindset from swimming from feed to swim to your next surprise. So I was waiting for the next little disaster to come and preparing myself mentally for it. Because, you know, something like false bait throws everything at you out there.
I'm sure. So in that light, I mean, how does this compare with the rest of your brilliant swims that you've done?
Tom, in terms of stature and how I felt leading up to it and how nervous I was for it, it ranks right at the top. As you pointed out, I was finished at 2:30. Now, when you've really got your head in the right place and you've got your body in the right place and you're so trained, and I was waiting for it to get dark, but I was actually finished, you know, almost in time to get back to the pub. I felt a little robbed. So it was a fantastic achievement, but in terms of stature, it wasn't my toughest swim at all. I was really well trained for it, and I walked out with a lot of energy, to be honest. So it certainly ranks right in the top 3 of my accomplishments, personal accomplishments, but it wasn't my toughest swim.
So how does it compare to the English Channel? I mean, we're talking very similar distances. I mean, the temperature probably not too different. You're not having the same currents, perhaps, but obviously, you know, there's a lot of focus right now to try and promote false bay as a swim, and it's very much likened to the English Channel simply because of distance. Do you think that's a fair comparison?
It's certainly a fair comparison, but I think the only thing that is really that similar is the distance. They're almost identical distances as the crow flies. But I can give you a very, very long list of reasons why the English Channel is extremely different mentally and for your prep to a false bay. And things will change over time as more people do it, and as you know, the skippers like Derek and others become more familiar with it. You know, firstly, the English Channel, you know that the current runs 6 hours that way and then it runs 6 hours that way because it's tidal. You have boat skippers who have probably done it for the last 20, 25 years. They specialize in it. That's pretty much often their only income or a significant part of it. That's what they do. You throw money at the problem and you arrive, you choose your skipper, and then that becomes his problem. You know what the temperature is going to be between July and September. It is pretty consistent. You know, if you're swimming in August, your temperature will be that. What else? Yeah, so then coming back to false bay, the temperature ranges literally from 10 until till 22. It can be warm one day and cold the next day. This wind changes it that way. We're still trying to figure out all of that. The currents are an enigma. Contrary to popular belief, I did not have wave assist, waves pushing me towards Royals to help me get a good time. I can show you some footage with the waves. Everything was rolling over me, but yet I was definitely getting some kind of assist. And Andrea Mason, who then swam a week later in better looking conditions, but she had a really tough swim again, and she's a better swimmer than me. She was slower. So there are definitely currents at play that we don't know. So that makes it extremely hard. The skippers are still learning. They don't have all the answers yet. They haven't seen it all. You have to play a much more important role in selecting your day. It took me years to find the right day and actually stand on that shore. Whereas, and also, let me add in this, living in Cape Town with False Bay on my doorstep has made it actually much harder for me. When you do something like a channel, any one of the big channels, you usually get a week window. You then fly to Dover, and all you do in that week is worry about your swim, when you're going to swim, and it's the only thing you have to worry about. When you're in Cape Town and you're running a business and you're traveling and you have a son and life goes on, and it's on your doorstep. So no, we won't swim today, let's try tomorrow. It tends to, procrastination is a lot easier, especially when you're as nervous as I was. So those are just some of the subtle differences.
So there's a lot of focus. Obviously, you as your swimmer, it's an incredible achievement, but in the background, you've got a support boat, and presumably they're not just throwing drinks at you every half an hour. I mean, there's quite a lot of work that goes in there. I mean, how important for a swim like this is your support crew? What are they doing, getting you from A to B?
They are doing a lot. I don't know the phrases on this video, but they did, first and foremost, the biggest, and I'm talking personally here, after all my swimming, the thing I still haven't nailed is nutrition, what to feed on such a long swim. I've tried everything, nothing really works. And I was having a little panic literally the day before, the afternoon before. I was still walking the Isles of Discam looking for different ways, and people are giving me different advices. So I still haven't got that waxed. And I phoned Derek and said, listen, can I borrow your flasks? I need some hot water, but I don't own a flask. And Derek said to me, Ryan, you know what, let us handle your feed. And they literally took that entire burden off. All I had to do was pitch with some water and pre-mixed carb stuff and little treats that I might enjoy along the way. In retrospect, I didn't have any of those. So that, Tom, from a support point of view, was probably what people don't think of. And I've never had anyone take the feed out of, off my hands. That was huge for me. Then on the actual day, once you start sliding into a swim that's long, you're feeding every half an hour. Those half an hours start going quite quickly. And so I was starting to feel quite bad, because the water was really rough. I'm going to try to show a little video in a second just to see if you can get a gauge on how rough it was. So I'm breathing to the right and I'm watching Derek for the entire time. He didn't stop. You can't even stop to have a wee. The boat is rolling and turning all the time. So they're busy. Debbie is pouring my feed. She sits down. It seems like a few seconds before she starts preparing my next feed, and then I feed. So they work really, really hard. And obviously, having faith in your support crew and having trust and knowing that they know how to sort out medical issues, if there are any out there, for me is the kind of peace of mind that I needed and I'd want on every swim, just to let me focus on the way forward. Let me see if can I try show that quick?
Yeah, go for it.
I don't know if it's going to translate because a share screen on video doesn't always work, but here's an idea of what the conditions look like.
That's not flat.
No. So I mean, it was like that for quite a long time. Video never does it justice either. Let me just say that. Hopefully you got a little idea of, I mean, that is quite hard to swim in for many hours. And that is why I always advocate doing the total body confusion training. If you think you're going to get it right, if you do all your training looking for that perfectly flat ocean to go and train in, or the just stay in the swimming pool, get your fitness in the pool, but you need to swim in the rough water, in the flat water, in the warm water, in the cold water, in the daytime, in the nighttime, in the rain. You need to throw it all at yourself to keep your body guessing, because when you do get out there, it does throw everything at you, like it did to me on the day.
So those who know you well know that this has been front of mind for you for probably 3 or 4 years at least. So now this is done, what other swims around the Western Cape do you have your eye on, if you're willing to tell us?
Sure. I do have some, Tom. So firstly, you know, the most common question is, what's next? So my quick response is I'm actually just taking a month of not having anything that's next, because these things, when I take on a challenge, these things weigh heavily on my shoulders, and, you know, you got to really get serious. And if I talk about it, then I got to do it. I do have a much bigger challenge planned. The one I'm going to mention now is not that challenge, so but I've always, since I started swimming, I've had a desire to try and swim from Robben Island to Dasson Island. I'm not training for it. It is not my goal. It's about, I estimate, just over 60 kilometers. At the moment, I'm just not geared for the cold. But that is, I think, the ultimate Western Cape island to island swim that I'd like to do one day, but who knows? Now that I've let it out there, someone will do it before me, but I'm that guy. Tony Salmayer will probably jump in knowing that guy.
He's still trying to catch you on the Robben Island side of things. So yeah, I mean, which leads me to my next question. I mean, with 100, is it 115?
Yeah, 115.
I can't keep track about that. What keeps you swimming Robben Island?
The beauty, firstly, the challenge, secondly. Even though I've done it so often, every single one is different for me, and every single one is a challenge. The cold is brutal. Those many watching, I know, have done Robben Islands or planning to do Robben Islands. The challenge of the Robben Island is not the distance. You can all get that fitness. It's the cold. It's performing for an extended period in a natural state or sort of speedo costume without wetsuit is obviously the genre I plan. That's the biggest challenge, Tom. But for me, it's the greatest training ground ever. You know, you get tired of the swimming pool. I do a lot of laps. But, you know, to be able to pop down to Big Bay and get taken to the island by Big Bay events and drop there and swim to the beach under Table Mountain, we have dolphins, we have seals, we have whales, we have sunfish, and then we have everything that stings you and irritates you as well. It really does, mentally and physically. I think it's one of the best training grounds if you are planning something like a False Bay or an English Channel or something bigger. Also, you know, I certainly didn't set out to be the guy who's done the most Robben Islands. You know, I still remember it was only in 2003 when I met Tony Salmayer at a training squad with Gary Freeling, and I managed 20 laps, and I wanted to vomit because I was so exhausted. And walking home, like limping to my car, Tony says, "Hi, my name's Tony Salmayer, and here's a book on open water swimming, and I think you should do a Robben Island." I remember thinking, you know, what's he smoking? But I took that book home and I started reading some stories, and so my journey started. So it was never, ever my plan, now I want to be the oak who's done the most. But because I use it as such a great training ground for my English Channel, for other channels, for you know, my North Channel at Tempton, just to stay fit, the numbers started racking up, and then, you know, you start to see a target ahead and you start to chase it. So
that when you got given that book and you did your first Robben Island, I mean, I think all of us who've done a Robben Island will remember preparing for that first one. I mean, was the first one your hardest one?
No, my second one was my hardest one. And the reason, and it's got nothing to do with the conditions. The conditions were better on my second one. The first one, I was so nervous. I was a novice swimmer. Obviously, I had no experience. And I was extremely nervous, and I trained hard for it. So you get it done, and you've got all the adrenaline, and your mind's in the right place. The next one was when my sister Jill said, "Hey, I want to do a Robben Island." And I was like, "Oh, well, you know what? I've done that. I'll come, I'll join you. No problem." Without paying any mind to the fact that she was half my pace. And I didn't get my head right, and I kind of arrived, and, you know, halfway into that Robben Island, I suddenly realized, first hour was wonderful, swimming slowly, I could look at the view, but then that cold set in, and I realized, you know, I'm not swimming at my pace, and I can't swim at my pace unless, you know, it's Jill's swim, the boat was going at her pace, and I very, very nearly did not make my second island. And by the way, that's my other little accolade that I love to tell. Is that I have never, in 115 swims, this is my own personal goal, I have never voluntarily pulled out of a swim at any stage because I was too cold or too tired. There are 3 occasions when I have got out. One is that I mentioned his name again, Tony Salmayer, and it was too misty. We didn't have GPS and literally couldn't see your hand in front of your face. Another time, 2 seals chased me out. They were getting quite aggressive and starting to nip at my toes. That was with Mark de Klerk. And the third time was with a much faster swimmer from, I can't remember where, Amanda Brinkman, I think her name is. And she asked me to swim with her. And within the first 100 meters, she had disappeared into the distance and I was left there. So I had to get out. But otherwise, I have never. And that's a nice accolade that I like to challenge myself with.
Oh, great. I've got a couple more questions for you, but I just want to invite the audience to ask any questions in the chat area. We'll get to those in about 5 minutes or so. But I've just got a couple more questions for you about Robben Island. I mean, I think there are quite a few people who haven't done a Robben Island swim before. I think I just want to ask you around both the mental preparation, what do you do? And also the physical preparation, what do you do? Are you somebody who's doing swim squad, or are you swimming, you swim on your own like a lot of swimmers have done? Do you gym? What sort of training do you do on that side, both the physical and also the mental?
Yeah, a little bit of all of the above. So firstly, I've been with a squad since I started swimming with Gary Freeling. I'm still at his squad as often as I possibly can, 2 or 3 times a week. A squad for me is amazing because you don't have to think what to do. You can just get in, get told what to do, and there's usually, you choose the lane that's a little bit too fast for you, and you end up having to really push. Guys like Renee Prinsloo in my lane, those oaks are fast, and they push me hard. So I do that, but then obviously you have to acclimatize to the cold. That's the biggest challenge of this. So you have to get down, if you're living in Cape Town, get down to Clifton or Camps Bay, and expose yourself and see how you're going to react to the cold, because I think anyone who knows anything about cold water swimming, very much the challenge is not physical. You can get the physical fitness, it's the mental fitness, because that water, that cold impacts heavily. It implements pain, panic, and fear, and those come together to accentuate self-doubt, and all these defense mechanisms kick inside your head, and all you can think of is how to get out. And once you're aware of that, you can manage it a little bit better in the water. So I always say, Tom, for someone, and I help a lot of people on their first islands, is that your swim, you need to get this in your head. Go into the water with the following in your head. Your swim only starts the first time you think, I need to get out. Because what happens is you usually jump into that water. It's cold, you have that little ice cream headache, but then you start swimming and it's actually fine. You go numb or whatever. It's absolutely beautiful. Everything's lovely. And you think, I've got this. And then all of a sudden that cold starts hitting the core, and that sends that entire defense mechanism. Your mind starts going berserk. And all you can think of is getting out, and you think, I can't because it's just too cold. When that happens, I ask people to try and pinpoint that moment, because that is when your swim really starts. That's the challenge of Robben Island, is when you start feeling that. Robben Island is not meant to be a lovely swim and you walk out on the beach and and think it was lovely. You're meant to walk out on the beach and go, holy cow, that was hard, I just made it. And you're meant to have a proper shiver, and you're meant to go through the recovery process. And that is hard. It's hard to compute that. So for me, mental, but be aware that when you want to get out, that's when your swim starts. And generally you then within sight of the beach or an hour to go, and you can work through the pain.
Oh, great. I think we're starting to get questions, and one of the questions actually aligns with one of the last questions I wanted to ask you. So many don't know, but many of us do know that you do a lot of motivational talks, not just to South African audiences, but a growing group of international audiences. So, and one of the big things that you do talk about that many of us have heard is that you were a 28-year-old couch potato, and something went click, and you got you in the water. What was it, or who was it? Who got you to change gear and then to focus on all these goals and all that?
Well, I can credit a lot of people, but in this case, I'm going to credit myself a little bit for clicking into gear. But how it started was I recognized the need to do something. I was 28. I was getting fat and loving the remote too much, sitting on the couch. And I took a client away, a guy called Grant Fraser. He was in my advertising business. And he said, well, if you want to get fit, you know what, I've got this little swimming squad. Why don't you join? And I joined it. And then guys like Tony who suggest Robben Island, and my mental state was absolutely, that's reserved for athletes. Who swims Robben Island? You must remember back in those days, there weren't that many people who had done it. If you did it, it still made the newspaper, which, newspapers were big in those days as well. And it was absolutely not for me. It was way above my abilities. But yet, thanks to a little bit of perseverance and the camaraderie of a swim squad and meeting the right kind of people, someone who's actually done a Robben Island and lots of Robben Islands, and you're like, wow, but they don't look that different to me, hang on. And eventually achieving my first island, and starting my journey going, you know what, Ryan, you, only a few months ago, you honestly believed this was not for you, this was too hard, this was impossible for you, what else? And I started that journey, and that took me into the genre of cold because of all that impact, and went around pushing different boundaries, first my own boundaries, lots of times my own boundaries, and then eventually what was meant to be possible for humankind, we started to challenge a little bit on a level as well. And that has given me unbelievable scope to understand how our brains work, how our minds work, this unbelievably powerful gateway to greatness that lives in our head, that is actually not designed to propel us forward in a difficult, uncomfortable, hostile situation, enter a world pandemic. It's meant to actually keep us safe. So we default inwards. We default to look for reasons why we can't. We find excuses why we can only operate in this little bubble where we all feel safe. And once you understand that and you're aware of it, and I've been, thanks to the element of cold largely, I've figured a lot of this out, nowhere, only the tip of the iceberg. And I can now preach on stages and tell a fantastic story. And when people believe that I was a couch potato not that long ago, and now I've achieved, I've just 2 days ago got my third Guinness World Record. Now, if you have no idea how bizarre that is to me, and I am absolutely normal. And I think that's what a lot of people, who don't know me personally, they might see the swims and they pedestal you, and they think of me how I thought of other people back in the day. And I spend a lot of time saying, it's not like that. If you want to swim, if that's your thing, you can do it. And if swimming's not your thing, find what is.
Okay. We got a question from Catherine Person, who incidentally swam with the relay team. In fact, yeah. I think set a record, which was short-lived, but record nonetheless. So if you have a moment of major suffering in a big swim, do you have a regular mantra or source of motivation that you go to, or does your grit come from various sources?
That's a lovely question. And firstly, Catherine, well done on your relay, and well done for getting out there and for also pioneering that route. I was the first solo, but you guys did it before me, that direction as a relay. That's a great question. I've got a lot of things that I go. I think the answer is a variety. There isn't just one thing. We all got personal battles, and we've all got personal. I go to a lot of places. Some of it's just pure. I just I don't want to lose face. I don't want to fail. That drives me a lot, maybe more than it should. And then the other, my late mom always used to give me little bits of advice, and I remember in the English Channel just telling me, I want you to think like every single stroke is just one stroke closer in those days to France. And I played that in my mind quite a lot out in False Bay as well. Every stroke, even though it seems you put your head up and you look and those mountains haven't moved, they are still just as far away as they were 2 hours back. But then you just tell yourself, what, every stroke, I know I'm moving, and I am getting closer. So it's things like that, and also. For a swim like that, I'm so conditioned that I almost look forward to the hardship. I look for that place where I'm actually going to break. I'm going to have to go from body to mind and pull myself. I'm looking for that hard moment. Didn't happen for me in False Bay. I'm actually quite grateful. I swam False Bay. I swam when it started and I finished. It was fantastic. English Channel, I had moments where I really broke down, couldn't take one more stroke, and had to kind of change gear to pull myself across mentally. And I've had that on quite a number of other swims. You'll be surprised on much smaller swims. You get your nutrition wrong, your mindset's not right. Sometimes your body, you have to change gear. So yeah, I actually convinced myself that I'm looking forward to those really tough times, and when they hit, I can't moan about them. I've just got to deal with them. So I hope that answers it in some way, Catherine.
All right, so we've got another question from Maurice Sanderhoff. The great Theo Yach used to count to 1,000 and start again. Do you ever count?
How's it, Maura? No, I don't count. No, I'm not a counter. Actually, I do a form of counting, and most of it happens in fact, yeah, actually, here's a little secret. Not a secret, it won't help anyone else, but I convert everything into lengths. So Robben Island for me is 300 lengths. So once I start, and I actually count down 10 lengths at a time. So and I've got my comfort zones. You know, my average training session is 5K. So once I've only got 200 lengths to go, then I'm like, well, you know what? It's only an average training session. For something like False Bay, I think it was 1,360 lengths that I'd computed I needed to do. So I was counting those down nicely, you know, waiting to get in the comfort zone. But my parameters was slightly shifted. I was just hoping. I do a lot of training of 20K distances. I go down to Langebaan with swim camps with Derek and them, and we do a 20K distance quite often. So I convinced myself that once I've only got 20Ks to go, that's a comfort zone for me, and I shouldn't moan. So the kilometers before the 20K were what I really had to concentrate on. Once I got to the 20K mark, I'm like, you know what? How many times have you done 20Ks, Ryan? You've got this. So yeah, it's a form of counting.
Oh, another question from Madam Chair, sitting right next to me. Once you've done a big swim like False Bay crossing, do you find that people always then ask you what next? And in fact, I ask you what next as well. But when does the next big swim stop? Or is the plan to continue swimming like certain of our colleagues who swam until 80?
Yeah, listen, if I can be like Otto one day, I'll be a very happy guy. Yeah, there's always, you know, again, when I'm planning for something, I always get to a place where I'm so frustrated and so stressful and, you know, all this pressure that I always say to myself, if you get this right, Ryan, you can stop. But that never happens. As soon as you walk out, those endorphins set in and you start thinking what's next, and it wasn't as hard as you thought, you could have gone further. All those things play in my head. So there is definitely going to be something next. Of what it is exactly yet, I don't know. So no, it's definitely not going to stop. But I did have a little bit of a laugh, Tom. You know, when I finished my False Bay, you had a brutal hour and a half back on the boat in waves, which was probably harder than the swim itself. I then got there, then drove home. And before I could even have a shower, my phone was ringing. I had to do a radio interview on the way home with Cape Talk. I got home and my phone was ringing. I answered the phone. It was an Argus journalist. And she was saying, where and when will you be training tomorrow? Because we'd like to come get a photo of you training. And I very politely said, listen, do you know the story you're covering? Do you know what I just did? Yes, you swam in False Bay. I said, yeah, it was a fairly big swim, and I'm probably going to give myself the day off tomorrow. Anyway.
So, yeah, Ryan, I mean, we haven't really, there's so much more to talk about. We haven't really touched on this at all, but will we see you, I mean, to the point of what's next, will we see you back in the ice?
That's also an interesting question, Tom. Again, never say never, but I feel I've done enough for myself in the ice. I really have pushed my limits, and I don't have any appeal to push any further. And I will speak for myself, but I'm fairly sure a lot of people who tell themselves they love getting into ice water, it's horrible. It's not nice. It challenges you. It's brutal. You learn stuff about yourself. It's a fantastically difficult challenge, but don't try and tell me you love it. And I certainly don't. So I'm going to find stuff that I love, I think. But yeah, I don't diss the ice in any way, and I'll never say never. I probably will, but I'm not looking for another ice challenge.
Okay, we up with time, I think. Okay, well. Yeah, so Ryan, I'd like to thank you all for the questions. I didn't get to all of them, but thank you very much for your time and sharing with us your anecdotes and your swimming wisdom. A lot of us find it quite inspirational what you do, and keep inspiring everybody. I think you will continue doing that for some time. So thank you very much for joining us, and thank you to everybody else for joining us from wherever you are in the world. I know there's some international audience as well. So thank you very much. We'll be doing this, we're not sure, maybe every six 6 to 8 weeks. We should have some more great speakers to come on board and share with us their anecdotes. If you've got some feedback for us, we're welcome to hear that. Just a reminder, if you want to become a member of the CLDSA, you can visit www.cldsa.co.za, and you can take up membership. That will give you free access to our talks, as well as some discounts on coaching and also appreciation of your swim as well. So keep inspiring us, Ryan. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you in the water.
Thanks, everybody. And for those who want questions answered, I'm so available. Easiest is to get hold of me on Instagram, actually, on Ryan_Stramrood. Just block a message in there. I monitor that all the time. Otherwise, you can email me on Ryan@Stramrood if there were questions that you'd like answered. I'm fairly accessible. So please, I'm here. If anyone needs help with anything, I always do my best to help. Thanks to everyone for listening. I really appreciate your time and interest. Amazing.
Thank you. Okay, bye everybody.